One, we are live.
Blast off.
All right. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to our live audience. You are, can everybody hear me? I'm just actually doing a test on my sound.
Yep.
Yes.
It's okay. Perfect, because I'm having a little bit of in and out. So if for some reason it continues, I may transfer over to my phone. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our tenant quality and tenant engagement meeting. We're delighted to welcome our public audience and those that are here with us in person. We have a few committee members, Maureen and Jim. We also have Lawrence and Brenda who have joined us, and Tom Hunter, our CEO, and we have some presenters that we'll introduce later on in the meeting. And as we get close to June, I think that one thing I wanted to acknowledge is that we're getting close to the second anniversary of this corporation. So June 1st will mark 2 years. And I don't know where those 2 years went, actually, because I remember us actually coming together to form this corporation. And I'm looking forward to Tom providing some highlights as we go forward. We have a full agenda today. And as you will notice, we're focusing on the operational dashboard, and our big presentations, and I said to the group earlier that I'm very excited about this, is our report from our tenant survey. And we have Forum Research that will be presenting that. And then we will also be going through an update on another really important item, which is our community activity and Community Connect update. And we, I apologize, but I don't apologize to the board members that we sent out a very big package. We wanted you to have all of the details, but we will actually be going through a more a shorter version of the report on the tenant survey later in today's meeting. We did also include 2 consent agenda items. We discussed actually just really wanting to leave enough time for the survey and the community fund. But if there are questions around the strategic direction, Q1 2024 progress report and the quality improvement project report, we will leave. We'll ask the question when we get to those agenda items, but we put them on as they call them consent agenda items, which means that we can approve it and we would move it forward. But we didn't want to actually let anybody think that there wasn't work underway in terms of our QIPs and our strategic goals. So that's what we're going to focus on. And with that, I'm going to start for those of you who don't know me online, my name is Linda Jackson, and I am very proud to be the chair of this committee and a member of this board, public member of this board. So we start always for a moment to reflect on the land that we live on. Toronto Seniors Housing acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. We also acknowledge all treaty people, including those who came here as settlers, as migrants either in this generation or in the generation past, and those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. We pay tribute to those ancestors of African origin and descent. Okay, we will now proceed to item 3, the approval of the public meeting agenda. Are there any amendments to the agenda?
My phone or my purse.
Okay, hearing none. May I have someone move that May 29th, 2024 committee public agenda? And this is, we're not going in camera at this meeting, so all of the agenda items are in public. Thanks, Maureen. And a seconder? Jim, thank you. All in favor? Terrific. So that be it resolved that May 24th public meeting agenda is as presented is approved. We'll then move to item number 4, conflict of interest. Can I ask if anyone has a conflict of interest for today's agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 5, approval of the public session minutes of March 25th, 2024. Are there any amendments or comments or questions with regards to the minutes of March 25th, 2024? Go ahead, Maureen. Oh, I think you're still on mute.
Thank you. Two things I just wanted to mention. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong agenda item here. They're the action items.
Okay, we haven't got to the action items yet, but we can.
Okay.
Do you want to hold it for the action item, Maureen, just for 1 second?
Sure. Yeah.
Anything with the minutes, just so we can get an approval? All right, so we'll approve the minutes. Can I have someone to move the approval of the minutes? Maureen or Brenda or Lawrence? I think I've got a Brenda and Maureen, thank you. So they are all moved, and be it resolved that the minutes as presented have been approved. And now we're going to move on to the action item. So thank you. It's actually important for us to take a look at those. And Maureen, did you have a comment about the action items?
Yeah. Number 1, I think it's number 1. It says completed. That's the community safety audit schedule, and the building list was supplied there, but the schedule was not. I think I had asked for that because I thought perhaps I'll drop in on one of the buildings just to see whether the tenants are actually involved in that audit or not, but I never did get the schedule, just the list of addresses. The other thing, I'm hoping that Grant can help me with this, perhaps after the board meeting. It says less rotation removed from the roadmap. Staff will consider amending. Can you, Grant, just tell me where I can find that amendment? I want to see what's there. I know we looked at a version where there was things crossed out and added in, but I don't know where to find the final version of what that says there.
Yeah, that is a bit confusing, isn't it? Grant, yeah. Can you decipher that for us?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. My apologies. So through the chair, Maureen, that was in reference to the strategic directions roadmap, and there was a particular item in the roadmap where there had originally been an amendment proposed when we brought it forward to the QTE meeting, and this is where this action came up in February. So we subsequently, and essentially what had happened is we had redlined out an item, and you had asked us to put it back. So essentially we did put it back as originally was there, and it is in the updated roadmap that went to the board meeting subsequent to that. So okay. I can follow up and have it sent the just a pointer to, or actually I'll send you the whole roadmap and just tell you which page it was on, and that'll give you a clarification. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Grant.
No, that's fine.
Thanks, Grant. And can we get the copy, the schedule for the audits to Maureen as well, or to the group?
We can follow up on that as well and see if we can get a schedule on when they're actually planned.
Thank you.
Terrific. That's great. Thanks very much. Any other questions with regards to the action list? I do find it helpful to have this list, and thank you for reviewing it carefully, Maureen. I appreciate that. Even that they noticed that you took something out and put something back in, that's good. That's great. Okay, then I think that I don't think we need an approval for the action. So we will go on to the next item, which is our report from our CEO, and coming up to year 2. Feel free to take it over, Tom.
Great. Yes. Thank you, Linda, and through the chair to the committee. I think this is my first QTE meeting since I've been back, so great to be with this small and mighty group once again. And just as Linda mentioned, June 1st is the second anniversary, and letting the committee know that there's an upcoming town hall with staff on June 4th, and we're really going to take that opportunity to celebrate and acknowledge the significant progress that we've made over the past 2 years, and continued opportunities as we focus on going forward. And I do just want to take a moment to acknowledge and recognize some of the key items that have come through this particular committee over the last 2 years. That includes the strategic directions, formerly the interim, our key performance indicators, the establishment of the Community Connect Plus as our new tenant engagement approach. As you know, the quality improvement projects and a key policy area in the community activity funds. And that's just to name a few. And you've also been very actively involved in our discussions on whether it's operations, communications, engagement, and partnership activities. And you provided key feedback and insights in all these areas. And also just I think around the operations, it can generally, but I'd like to highlight some of the success that this group has had in terms of monitoring and encouraging the staff as it relates to our performance in areas such as vacancies, where we reduced in 2022 was at 5.12%. We're now down at 1.62% and consistently below 2%. They're decreasing arrears with our average rent collection around. I'm stealing Brad's thunder here, by the way, but I thought that's worth it for the update. Our collection rate of 99.6%, and the industry average there is 95.4%. And just this is kind of hot off the press. For the first time ever, we've exceeded 12,500 tenants with a zero balance or no arrears, and that in fact excludes tenants who have a repayment agreements. And then since 2022, there's also, this committee has also seen the evolution of our pest management, where we had no staff allocated to that. There's now a team of 6. We've helped to prepare over 343 units for tenants. 86 of those we have done ourselves, but also partnering with the city for the balance. And on average, we now clear just under 300 units per month for pest issues. So really keep working at that. And you'll hear a bit more about that on the operational dashboard today. Also at the June town hall, I think this is important for June. This is an important month, including Recognition Seniors Month, Pride Month, Indigenous People Month, and Filipino Heritage Month, amongst others. And really, it's this diversity which we celebrate, these important dates, and we will be communicating this both internally and on social media. The work around the CEOs connecting with the tenant tour, that continues. We are getting that schedule kind of established week to week, but certainly if board members are interested in coming, we'll make sure that you're getting that schedule. Let us know if you're not. Oh, Brenda, yeah, okay. And also, I wanted to mention too, just around, with the buildings that we now have recreational space in all of our buildings. We had a few holdouts, Jim would know that, but at 230 River and 12 King, we didn't have rec space, work with the city to find those. So I think that's a small, important marker around quality and tenant engagement. And also just wanting the committee to know that we've been asked to and accepted to speak at ONFA in November in Ottawa, and we'll be on a panel discussion about managing the intersection of housing, health, and social services, kind of very dear to this committee, and certainly providing our perspective on that. And it's our opportunity to share where we are, but also where we're looking forward to being with other housing providers and stakeholders in this really important wellness space. And also just wanting to let this committee know that we TSHC participated in a video entitled Saving Our Seniors. We were advocating for seniors in Toronto, highlighting the challenges faced by seniors and emphasizing the importance of community support to ensure well-being. Staff and tenants appear in the video, as well as our community members. And so you can access, just wanting to let you know that you can access that video on our website homepage. So that is my update for today, for this meeting. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tom.
Good.
And I just wanted to also thank you for the report, but also I should have acknowledged that this is your first meeting back because you were at one of our board meetings.
That's right. But yeah, old hat, right?
Thank you. Any questions for Tom?
Just me. Can you hear me? Where is the town hall on the 4th?
It's virtual.
Oh, okay.
It's right. Virtual team. Yeah, it's virtual.
Okay. And so Karen will send me that information. Where is she? There she is. I wouldn't mind participating and hearing that.
The staff town hall?
Yeah. if that's possible, yeah.
Okay, more questions?
Just one quick question. Yes, I'm sorry. I was trying to absorb as you were speaking. When you were talking about schedules, were you talking about your building visit schedules?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and that schedule will be sent out to us then.
Yeah, and Liz is kind of the keeper and worker on that schedule. So I think as she
Okay.
gets them scheduled, she sends them out. I don't. And Liz, you could correct me. I don't think we have many scheduled right now in advance. We're just kind of working that out. It takes a wee bit of work to get those lined up.
Okay, that's great.
Thank you.
Any other questions to Tom?
No, sounds great.
That's great. Then I think we are going to go on to the operational performance monthly dashboard. And I think that's over to Brad.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. Next slide, please. So the first slide just gives you an overview of arrears and vacancy and some of the other metrics that we keep an eye on. I think the big one here is the arrears for the April. You see how tiny that orange is, and that is our staff reducing the unmanaged arrears and ensuring that people receive prompt intervention. And we know that's one of the keys to preserving housing, right? Is to catch these balances when they're low before people have to enter into legal agreements and get sent to OACH and things such as that. I think one of the other things to point out is the bottom right, and that's the pest management. And you can see an increase in the number of treatments provided. Seasonal, it's a blip that happens every year about April, and we're working to work our way through those increased number of treatments as spring awakens. So do, unfortunately, so do our pests. Next slide, please. This slide is with regards to the arrears. You can see we had an overall decrease of about $200,000 in the arrears category. And again, it's the unmanaged category, just ensuring that tenants receive prompt interaction when it comes to arrears. Down at the bottom, we've given you kind of the overview of where these amounts are, and most of them have stayed relatively flat, relatively consistent across. But the big decrease was in the unmanaged of almost $45,000. Sorry, almost $70,000. Next
Wow.
slide. With regards to vacancies, bit of a difference here. We've separated out the affordable versus the RGI vacancy. And the reason that we did that is we're now reporting to the service manager separately on that. TSHC staff are responsible for the RGI vacancies. That's renting all the rent geared to income units. And we have a 2% target with the City of Toronto for that. We're currently at 1.62% and still falling. The affordable vacancies are currently sitting at about 4.12%. And those are managed through the service agreement with TCHC. And we're just looking for trends with regards to affordability and ensuring that they're renting our units in a prompt and efficient manner. There's a bit of a dip in the graph. The dip relates to the on offer stage, and what that is that we pre-signed leases with people. No sense in leaving people couch surfing or in a shelter or wherever they're coming from. We're able to waive some of the rent and get them in early in the month of March. So it had a bit of a decrease that's deceptive. Next slide. With regards to work orders, you can see that our staff completed 8,100 service requests for work orders. 62% of those are completed by staff. And we've given you the categories mainly doing with plumbing and janitorial. The vendor ones are mostly to do with pest control. And we've maintained a really, really great average. Our staff have completed consistently over 80% of work orders within 2 business days, which is the metric that we use to judge that by. Next slide. This is the administrative service request. These are the tickets that are completed by our SSCs and our TSAs. Last meeting, the committee asked for a bit of a breakdown with regards to what some of these categories were. So you can see the majority of these right now are assistance with the annual review process. And again, that's seasonal just because it's tax time. People are getting their notice of assessments. Generally, it's going to be a big time for returning in documents with regards to your RGI for the remainder of the year. And then below, you can see that over 86% of the service requests are actually being handled by our frontline staff, our TSAs and SSCs in the building. Very few escalations to the supervisory or the manager level. Next slide. And with regards to pest management, we had a bit of a blip in January. We had an increased treatments and then we got back on track. This has to do with over the Christmas holidays. There's a freeze put on vendors entering units. People don't want to move all their stuff and bag all their stuff. So we generally do a bit more of a preventative thing with regards to that. But in the month of April, we declared 217 units pest free, and we assisted with 8 preparations and including replacing bed. With Toronto Public Health assisting us with another 3 units. And these are residents that weren't otherwise able to prepare for the treatment themselves and would have led to migration issues to neighboring units, as well as led to ongoing infestations, which would have had an adverse effect on the residents' health. And then I believe the final slide is a bit of a glossary that the committee asked for with regards to some of the terms that we've used in here. That just makes it a little easier for the committee members to review the information when they receive the packages. That brings us to the end of the dashboard, if there's any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Brad, and thank you for the. I find the way you visually describe things is excellent. But Maureen, comments?
Yeah, I've got a couple of comments. I know Brad always likes to hear from me. Okay, which one first? Oh, okay. The numbers that you provide there, 1,149 or whatever places that were treated. I can't help but keep remembering back a few months ago when you did that single building that was the entire building treatment, and you found something along the lines of 40% of people who had not reported. So 2 questions on that. Are you still dealing with people who are not reporting, and has there been any other buildings scheduled for a full building treatment?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I always welcome your questions, Maureen, you know that. So through the chair, we have not scheduled any further buildings for the cleanout. What is going on right now is we're in the procurement phases along with Toronto Community Housing for a new vendor. One of the main advantages to that building cleanout process is that we're able to obtain a warranty for all the units that we treat. Without understanding what vendor or who may be assigned over the next few months to our portfolio, that we wouldn't be able to have that warranty enforced. We might be dealing with a vendor that we're no longer doing business with. So it really didn't make a lot of sense in order to clean out another building at this time. It would be, we'd be in the loss economically on that. With regards to people not reporting, that's always a problem. It's one of the things that we push in our tenant town halls when the regional team goes out, is that people need to report and trying to take away that stigmatism. We often tell the story that before coming to TCHC, I worked in $1 million condos, and there's no difference. They still treat the same number for pests. The only difference I always tell people is that the vendors aren't allowed to carry their equipment or park their vehicle on the site. We're currently working on some in-house training. Recently, we rolled up some legal training, letting our SSCs know how to use the landlord-tenant board as a tool and not a weapon. And currently, we're working on some training for our superintendents and our SSCs with our pest control team, as far as how to identify pests, how to inspect for pests, and how to help tenants get the referrals that they require for the preparation help. So hope to do more treatments as soon as we have a new vendor, Maureen, and clean some more buildings out.
Thanks very much, Brad. One other area, and Brenda, I know you have a question too, so I'll try and be quick here. At the last QTech meeting, I had mentioned that under the CCCs, the section of referrals was only 6%, which was quite low considering that originally that's what their job primary purpose was supposed to be. This report, it's not even on there. There's no referrals whatsoever. What's cooking?
Yeah, through the chair, it just didn't make the top 5%. And I think, like I said, right now our SSCs are responding to just under 2,300 requests for service from the tenants per month. But just because it's tax time right now, a lot of those are helping people secure their pensions, helping them file. If you don't complete your taxes on time, you lose eligibility for your gains top up. So we're working through that, and it's just overtaken with regards to the referrals.
Okay, thanks, Brad.
I would anticipate you'll see it come back up in the coming months after we're through tax time, though, Maureen.
Yeah. Okay. It always bothers me how much that rule has changed. I know that had they not taken on a lot of the tasks that were originally the tenant service administrator's tasks, probably those fabulous numbers you've got on arrears and vacancies wouldn't be. They contribute to that number as well. So I understand that, but at the same time, that SSC role was originally the key role in building trust and making referrals for tenants. So it always bothers me to see how much it has shifted. Thanks.
Yeah, and Maureen, I might just add that, like that number that Tom said earlier, that 12,500 tenants with a zero balance, I think that's got a direct relation to the relationship that the SSCs have with the residents in their communities and their ability to collect rent. One of the other metrics that we track is outstanding rent reviews. 2 years ago, we had in excess of 6,000 outstanding rent reviews. We're down into the 800s right now. And as far as ensuring that tenants have a roof over their head and are able to maintain their housing, it might not be the healthcare referrals that you're asking about, but it's definitely the SSCs leading that charge with regards to ensuring people are able to maintain their housing, I think.
Thanks, Brad.
Yeah, Brenda, I think you're next.
Yeah, just a couple quick ones. On the pest management, 1,165 units treated. So these numbers represent individual units. It doesn't include repeat visits. They're specific standalone units. Okay. And the number of units we have in our portfolio is how many?
Yeah, so through the chart, the units in our portfolio are just above 13,500.
Okay.
With regards to that 1165, I would say what we do is we practice block treatments. It's a proven way to deal with pest infestation.
Yeah.
So for every one of those units, you're also having a treatment done in the unit above, the unit below, and the neighboring units.
Okay.
What they can only apply pesticide if they see live activity.
Yes.
But they can do preventative measures. There's powders that they place under the fridge. So that does increase those numbers of units treated as those block treatments that we're performing.
So is there a magic number or a certain, what percentage of units can you expect will have problems with pest management? Is that such a number that's kind of known and understood, or is it just, you know?
We're really we're really data heavy with regards to that. We're just working on a way to track it within the home system. Unfortunately, we're doing it all manually on spreadsheets right now.
Oh, wow.
So we're hoping to improve that shortly.
Okay. And my last question was about the rapid rehousing. I can't remember where you show that.
It's on the vacancy side.
On the vacancies. So my question on that is, because I remember last year, you, if I recall correctly, challenge me if I'm wrong, we gave so many units in that initiative, and by year end, 70% had left or gone on to other things. And this has been the experience often of the instabilities, not just housing that they need, but other supports. So do we have a certain number that we hold deliberately for that category of client? You know, what's been our rate so far of being able to have them stabilize and stay more than a year?
That's a great question, and we're measuring that project. It's just about 200 units that we committed to the City of Toronto with regards to the rapid rehousing initiative for 2024.
Right.
It was the same number that we committed to them in the previous year. The success rate of the tenancies in that program has gone up consistently month after month. The city and us and ESHC continue to refine how people are followed up with, the supports that are put in place, The city's ability to hold the agencies that they partner with in order to provide support to these tenants has exponentially grown due to the feedback that our staff have been able to give. And we're hoping to prepare a report coming up to the City of Toronto with regards to the ultimate success of the program. I think the one thing that's really important when people hear about the rapid rehousing program is that these people would have been housed in TSHC regardless. There was, through our agreement with the city, we had a disadvantaged housing code, which meant that 1 in every 5 vacancies automatically went to somebody who was housing disadvantaged, which was either in a shelter system or on the street. This counts against that number, and it brings people in with a year long of supports from the City of Toronto. It brings them in with the city supplies a vendor to start them out with a bed, whereas these people previously would have just been placed into a unit and fended for themselves. So this program's getting more and more successful as it continues on.
Could you report back in future on this? Because my experience to date has shown that there's been a high failure rate, 70–80%. In my sister's building, they left within 2 months, and questioned the vendors. As to my experience, is they're not providing support in an intensive manner.
Let's put this item for a few, because I think, you know, with the article that was sent out and with a lot of focus on this, can we maybe put this as an agenda item for a future meeting, just to actually inform us in terms of, because I think you actually provided some interesting nuances with that. It's a really good question, Brenda. And I noticed Councillor Crisanti, your hand is up.
Yes, it is. Thank you. So just a couple of questions. Looking at the total, correct me if I'm wrong, but I recall you saying there's
If you're speaking, we can hear you. Oh,
can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
Okay. So I believe you said, Brad, that there's 8,178 total work orders, and that work orders have a 37% completion rate within 5 days. Is that correct? Is that what I heard?
Councillor, that completion relates to the 2,500 vendor work orders that are completed. When you're dealing with vendor things, some of our contracts when it comes to millwork and things like that, custom millwork for units can take a couple of weeks. It can take time for vendors to match tiles and that. So we measure the vendor against a 5-day standard, and they currently hit 37.5% of that. However, they complete 75% of the work that they're assigned by the end of the month. Our staff completed 5,674 work orders, and they completed 84.3% of those within 2 business days.
All right, and that was the 80% factor that you mentioned before.
Yes.
So what about the other 20%, and how long do they take? And are we looking at the ones that are taking maybe too long to look after, and trying to find ways of a remedy to increase the turnaround on those?
Yes, sir, we do. The issue is that some of our things that we do, even some of the ones that our staff do, when it comes to pest control, a bed bug treatment is typically 6 weeks long, so that exceeds the 2-day standard by a long margin. Of the 5,674, our staff do complete 95% of them prior to the end of the month. And looking at old work orders and having them reduce is something that we meet with the staff regularly about. And I believe that we're down in the 2,000 range with regards to work orders outstanding all time.
Okay. All right. So just last question. I also noted that the Northeast region has got the lowest number of pest treatments. So that's interesting. Do we know what we can attribute that to? And if we can, study that model, and maybe we can do something better in other regions.
Yeah, that's a great observation. Through the chair, what happens is that we generally find that the closer you are located to the downtown core, the closer you are to a subway artery, the higher the likelihood that bugs are able to spread. The other thing is that the buildings within the downtown core are also the oldest buildings as a general rule. So they're not the units aren't as sealed, and they don't have the same garbage and recycling facilities that the more suburban ones do, that you find in an Etobicoke or you find in a Scarborough. But absolutely, these are numbers that we look at all the time.
Thanks, Brad. I'm always amazed at how much knowledgeable you are.
Thank you.
Really, it's like, I'm glad that
Yes,
you're
yes,
not
yes.
doing $1 million condos anymore, that you're doing
You're with
doing
us.
it with us. So Jim, no questions before we move on to the survey?
Great.
Were
Jim,
you
you have a
talking to
question?
me?
Yeah. Oh, we
Can't
lost
hear
you.
you.
About rapid rehousing program, that by providing the supports needing, having success at keeping people
exactly.
out.
Exactly.
I just wanted to make sure that I took the right thing from it. Because I've been
Oop. Can't hear him.
Did others lose Jim?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
I think Jim, I think we lost you. We had you there for a moment.
Still can't hear him.
Oh, we can't hear you, Jim.
Can you hear me now?
A little bit, yeah.
How about now?
You better.
Still not.
Oh, and then we
No.
lost. Maybe
I
you'll
wonder,
your
I
comment.
wonder,
See my
yeah, if he
microphone.
turned off his camera, that might help too. Sometimes turning off your camera.
Yeah, the gremlins that we have, right? Oh, and now you're muted.
I said, I think you got the gist of what I was trying to say anyway.
Thank you,
Yes,
Jim.
yes.
We did, and we appreciate your efforts. Thank you. So thank you for that good discussion. So
one last one, Linda.
yeah, sure. Sorry,
One
Maureen.
last quick one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Brad, I'm really happy to hear that the city's involved in doing more of that follow-up piece around the supportive agencies. Because as Brenda noted, it's the piece that's been missing and been
Yeah.
quite problematic in a number of buildings. So the idea of bringing that forward as an agenda item, Linda, is a great idea. Is it possible to have someone from the city who's actually doing that work present for that meeting? That's my question.
Sounds like a great idea. And you know, in some ways, it's also interesting. This is a great segue to the survey, because I think that having supports is something that we'll probably be talking about in the survey. So survey results. So with that, I think what we'll do is we will move on to the next agenda item if there isn't any other questions. And again, thank you, Brad, answerer of all questions. We're now going to move on and welcome our guests who have joined us. I think it's Tasmia and Winson. And I'll pass it over to you, and maybe you can introduce yourselves and get us started.
Linda, apologies for interrupting. It's Grant here. I'm just wondering if I could just set a little bit of context for the committee on this, and then just before Tasmia and Win start, would that be all right?
Yes, please do. And my apologies for not setting that up properly.
No, it's fine. No, thank you. So just to as a context setting, so through the chair, so we're very excited here today to bring the 2023-2024 tenant survey findings to the committee. As the committee may recall, this item was originally started, and we did come to earlier committee meetings back in the fall as we were setting up for the survey. The purpose of this survey is to get an understanding and input and feedback from our tenants on their tenant experience, their experience living in Toronto seniors housing. And it's also providing a foundation for us in terms of measuring progress over time. The survey itself, and we talked about the development of the survey before at this committee and brought forward more details, but it did involve input from some members of the committee here today. It also involved the Senior Tenant Advisory Committee, some input from staff, and we also worked with Forum and from the previous survey as well that was done when we were still part of Toronto Community Housing in 2021. You're going to have an overview of the survey findings, a summary view. There is a detailed presentation in the package, and then there was a supplementary shorter version, kind of the abbreviated version of the findings. And Tasmia and Win are going to go over that in a couple of minutes. From this, our intent, and it's in the staff report that accompanies this item, is to develop a more specific set of actions. We have not developed an action plan out of this yet. However, we have started to talk about it internally. And as well, there's going to be further communication on the results of the survey, both internally and externally. After Win and Tasmia and Win from Forum do the presentation, there will be an opportunity for questions. And at that time, if you'd like, I can also provide some highlights from the feedback when we presented some of this information at STAC last week, which I know, Linda, you had noted an interest in. So with that, I'd also just like to introduce, we have Ayushman Banerjee here on the call as well. Ayushman's a business consultant with the Toronto Seniors Housing team and was our internal lead working on this project across the TSHC team and also working with Forum. And then as noted, we have Tasmia Shearer, a research analyst from Forum, and Winsome Steck, a senior research director. And with that, if it's okay, Linda, I'd turn it back to you and we can pass it over to Forum to walk us through this presentation. It should take about 20 minutes and then questions after.
That's fantastic, Grant. Thank you very much. And it will be great to have a little bit of feedback from the stack as well. So over to you, Winsome and Tasmia.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. We're glad to be here today to help present the findings from the 2023-24 tenant survey. So the purpose of the presentation today is really to provide some additional context for the detailed report that you've already received. There's a number of analytical approaches that we've included in the report itself, and I'll be providing a quick overview of each of those. In terms, next slide. Yes, great, thank you. Last slide, previous slide. Going back one, yes, thank you. So in terms of the agenda for the presentation today, we'll start by understanding the survey itself, including how the questionnaire was developed and the methodology for sending it out. And then we'll proceed to ways to interpret the survey responses. Next slide. So as Grant mentioned, there was a previous survey in 2021, and we used the questionnaire from that time as the basis for the 2023-2024 survey. However, there were some edits and updates as well. We consulted the strategic direction KPIs to help ensure that the survey was measuring what it needs to measure. As well, we had a couple of focus groups with tenants, and we also considered internal consultation with staff, primarily to ensure that the final survey was easy to use and had a lot of clarity, but also to make some updates as well. And therefore, there are some differences between this 2023-24 survey and the previous one in 2021. In terms of question types, the majority of questions on this survey invited tenants to provide their agreement to specific statements on a 5-point scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree. There were some yes or no questions, and there was also an open-ended question that allowed tenants to write in their own comments. Next slide. Coming to the research methodology, we mailed out a paper survey package to all households at TSHC across all 83 buildings. And that package included a copy of the survey, as well as instructions for completing the survey online or by phone if the tenant didn't want to return it back by the addressed envelope that was also included. And it also included instructions for accessing the survey in a total of 13 different languages. So we sent out a total of 13,472 survey packages, from which we received 3,223 responses. This represents a response rate of 24%, which is fairly high for a study of this nature, and it exceeds the internal target of 20% that was anticipated at TSHC. The final margin of error for this study was 1.73% at a 95% confidence level, and we can take that to mean that we can have a fair degree of confidence that these are reliable results. With 24% of tenants reporting back, it gives us a lot of rich data to work with. The survey was mailed out in early December 2023, with responses being received up until early February 2024. Next slide. So that concludes the first part of our presentation, where we took a quick look at understanding the survey itself, and now to understand some of the results from the survey, starting with the key insights. So what we'll be covering here is a snapshot of the more detailed results that are available in the full report, and the majority of these insights are presented with frequency analysis. Frequency analysis simply means the percentage distribution of results of those 5-point scale questions that we saw about earlier. For example, if 80% of tenants are agreeing with a certain item, this could generally be considered a favorable outcome, whereas if 50% of tenants are agreeing, this might be an area to look at further for concern. However, it does depend on the item being considered. So let's take a look at a few of those. Next slide. So the big picture. Overall, we found that 4 in 5 tenants are happy with TSHC services. 82% are proud to be a tenant at TSHC. 83% feel safe in their home. And even more than that, 87% feel that staff treat them with respect. Overall, these findings show that tenants are having a number of favorable experiences with TSHC, and they are encouraging results for the big picture. We'll be taking a closer look at each of these in the following slides. Next slide. So starting with the overall satisfaction. Now, most of the slides you'll see in this presentation are taken directly from the detailed report. So to help you understand what you're looking at, the bar at the top above the gray dotted line shows the total distribution of results to this question from all the tenants who replied to the survey. So overall, we found that 4 in 5 tenants, or about 80%, are generally happy with the services TSHC provides. How we got that 80% is it's a combination of those who said strongly agree or agree when we asked them to rate their agreement to the statement, I am happy with the services TSHC provides. So that combination score is called the top 2 score, and the majority of the percentages that you'll hear in this presentation are based on that top 2 score. So as well on this slide, we can see below the gray dotted line, we have 4 bars for each of the 4 regions. And this is included in the full survey report for every single question to help see if there are any variations between regions, which may depend on the question being considered. In this one, we can see that the results are fairly similar across the regions, with about 80% of tenants agreeing. Next slide. Coming now to the question, I am proud to be a tenant at Toronto Seniors Housing, of which we found that more than 4 in 5, or 82%, did agree, again, that top 2 score, that they are proud to be a tenant at TSHC. This is a new question in 2023. It came out of the tenant consultations and was suggested in some of the conversations with tenants as something that helps go beyond satisfaction to have a deeper sense of where tenant opinion is currently at. Next slide. Now, safety is always an important consideration, and often it did come up in the questionnaire development process with tenants as a point of concern. So it's a fairly interesting finding that about 4 in 5, or 83% of tenants, do feel safe in their home. And this could be a finding that could be taken forward in future consultations with tenants as well. Next slide. Now, in the survey, we did ask a number of questions about staff interaction and tenant opinions of those experiences. We're highlighting here the question of respect, or rather whether staff treat me with respect, which most tenants, nearly 9 in 10, or 87% of tenants, did feel that TSHC staff are treating them with respect. This was fairly consistent across all of the regions. And it helps, again, indicate that there are tenants having positive experiences with staff, and as well that staff are providing compassion and consideration in many of their interactions with tenants. Next slide. So it wouldn't be a complete look at the big picture without also having a quick look at opportunities for improvement. Now, these are areas where the agreement scores may not have been quite as high as the ones that we have seen. For example, in access to supports, we found that based on the survey, tenants could benefit from more help to access the services they need. In property management, tenants are largely happy with the cleanliness and maintenance of their buildings, but on the questions of pest control, there were some new findings. It was a new question in this year's survey, and 65% had indicated that they have received pest treatment. Of those, around 3 in 5, or 59%, feel that they received enough help getting ready for pest treatment. and 3 and 5 or 60% were happy with the outcome of their pest control treatment. These kinds of scores could indicate that there's room for change or improvement. And similarly, in questions around community participation, we were seeing fairly average levels of satisfaction. Next slide. So that concludes our quick look at the key insights. Now a deeper dive into the driver's analysis. The driver's analysis is one of the key tools we have to understand the responses that were received from the survey. And we really wanted to understand which areas and actions could make a real difference to tenants' overall level of satisfaction with TSHC. That's the purpose of doing this driver's analysis. It's accomplished via a statistical regression analysis to help identify the potential priority areas for future action. And these results are presented on a quadrant chart. So we'll be taking a closer look at those shortly. I want to draw your attention to the full report that does have a detailed driver's analysis and sentiment analysis, which is a related type for each region. For this presentation, we're going to be focusing on the overall satisfaction levels and what we could learn from them through this driver's analysis. Next slide. Now, this is our quadrant chart for the overall satisfaction with services. And how we can understand this is on the vertical axis going up and down, we have the level of satisfaction that tenants currently have with these items from the survey. And this level of satisfaction is based on that top 2% score that we've been discussing. In contrast, going across on the horizontal axis, we have the drivers of satisfaction. And what that means is how important are each of these items for the tenant's overall level of satisfaction with TSHC. So in the relationship between these two, we can help identify where our priorities should lie. For example, looking at the green zone at the top, this is the primary area for continuity. These are items that are currently performing well, meaning tenants are highly satisfied with their experience in these areas, and these are important items that are important for their overall level of satisfaction. So what we see in the green zone right now are receiving updates about necessary work in their building and being happy with how staff respond when they ask for help or make a request. So again, these are items where things are going well, and it's an encouraging finding. We want to encourage current approaches to continue to help continue to see these high levels of satisfaction in these areas, which are important or have a high impact on the overall satisfaction that tenants have with TSHC. In contrast, if we look directly below at the red zone, the primary areas for improvement, these are areas that are highly important for tenant satisfaction, but where satisfaction is relatively low right now. For example, if we take comfortable sharing concerns and making complaints, TSHC, in the overall survey results, we found that 75% of tenants are comfortable currently with sharing their concerns, which may not on its own be considered a particularly low result, but when we compare it with all of these other variables that or components of tenant experience that are important to tenants, we see that it's not performing quite as highly as some of the other items. And that's how we can know that we might want to prioritize future actions in this direction. We may not be able to take action on everything, and that's why we do the driver's analysis to help understand which items have the most priority, and those are the ones here in that red zone. Coming to the items on the left in the blue and yellow, these are still important and they should still be considered, but they may be secondary areas of focus because they don't have as much of an impact on the overall level of satisfaction. Next slide. So a different way to understand that driver's analysis is just what are some of the top priorities that it helps us identify. So some of those key areas include program offerings, such as expanding program offerings to better meet the tenants' needs, helping tenants access needed services, and again, working with tenants to improve how they can share their concerns and complaints based on the driver's analysis that was conducted on overall satisfaction. These are some very key areas where we can make the most difference going forward to overall satisfaction. Making improvements here could help us see improvements in overall satisfaction. Next slide. So that covers our quick look at the key drivers. Moving now to the demographics. The survey did include a number of questions that asked tenants about their demographic details. We know we have a diverse group of seniors, but we do need to ask these questions to help understand who completed the survey. I do want to note that the wording of the questions and options in this section were based on the City of Toronto's data for equity guidelines. As well, we're going to be going through this section quite quickly. It's just to give you a very quick overview of some of our findings. Next slide. So for age, we found that 72% of tenants, most tenants, are between 65 and 84 years old. Next slide. In terms of how long they've lived at TSHC, a large number of tenants, 42%, have lived at TSHC for more than 10 years. Next slide. In terms of language preference, the majority, or 57% of tenants, prefer speaking in English. The next most popular language group included Cantonese, Mandarin, and other Chinese languages for 14%. Next slide. In terms of gender, 3 in 5 of those who responded to the survey identified it as women, so that's 60%. Next slide. For sexual orientation, 64% of tenants described their orientation as heterosexual or straight. It's worth noting that 30% of tenants preferred not to answer this question or left it blank. Next question. Next slide. One of the questions we asked was whether the tenant was born in Canada, and about 4 in 5, or 79% of tenants, were not born in Canada. Next slide. Of those tenants who were not born in Canada, the vast majority, or 88%, have lived in Canada for more than 10 years. Next slide. In terms of racial background, about 3 in 10, or 28% of tenants, describe their racial background as white. 21% describe their background as East Asian. 10% describe their background as Black. There was also an option for multiple answers in case tenants felt that they belonged to multiple groups. Next slide. And finally, demographics. Now, sorry, disabilities. We found that 51% of tenants have one or more disabilities. This was in response to the question asking them if they have any condition that makes it harder for them to fully take part in their community. For example, physical illness or pain was a common category at 31%, and mobility disabilities were a common category at 22% as well. Next slide. Now, what can we do with this information that we collected about these demographic details? Well, this helps us perform something called the segmentation analysis. And what that does is it examines the potential relationship between demographic factors and tenant satisfaction. This is the potential relationship, and the findings from this analysis are suggestive of how groups at TSHC might be experiencing things differently. This is again accomplished with a regression model that compares the demographic factors and how that they impacted each question. Another thing we should note here is that insights can only be presented for the demographic groups where there was a large enough number of responses to generate statistical power. So I'll be taking you through a quick summary of some of the findings from this approach. Next slide. In terms of overall satisfaction, as we saw earlier, tenants are generally very satisfied with living at TSHC, and those who are born outside of Canada, those who prefer to speak a language other than English, are the most satisfied. When it comes to pride at living at TSHC, the groups that felt especially proud to be living at TSHC included Black tenants, those born outside of Canada, and those who prefer to speak a language other than English. Next slide. Now, when it comes to preferring a language other than English, the survey findings actually suggest that having that preference does not necessarily affect a tenant's ability to understand their lease, responsibilities, or rights. It doesn't necessarily impact their ability to receive updates about necessary work in their buildings. But nonetheless, these tenants do have a preference to receive information in their preferred language. When it comes to race, we found again that Black tenants tend to feel more pride living at TSHC. Black tenants felt more positively about the cleanliness of their buildings and felt safest in common spaces. East Asian tenants tended to be less satisfied living at TSHC, which could be reflected in their perspectives on a range of questions, including around pride, community, and building maintenance. White tenants were especially satisfied with the maintenance of their buildings, but tended to be less proud to be tenants at TSHC. And as we noted, among other groups, there were not necessarily enough responses to generate statistically meaningful results, so we can't necessarily analyze their experiences. Next slide. In terms of gender, women who responded to the survey were more concerned about building cleanliness and felt that they received less support in getting ready for pest treatment. They also may have felt less safe in their units. However, there wasn't a significant difference between men and women's perception of safety in common spaces as opposed to within their units. When it comes to disability, those with disabilities did tend to find their units to be less accessible, their units and their buildings, compared to those who don't have disabilities. But nonetheless, 89.5% of those with disabilities did consider their home to be accessible. People with disabilities may tend to have less awareness about who to contact for support on various issues. When they do request help for maintenance or pest treatment, they may be less satisfied with the outcomes. And tenants with disabilities may have a more difficult time understanding their lease and responsibilities as well. Again, the findings in this section are considered to be suggestive and generally just help us have information on how different tenant groups' experiences might vary. Next slide. Coming now to the qualitative findings. Now, this section is really all about hearing from tenants in their own words. And in the detailed report, you will see some direct quotes from what tenants actually wrote in this section of the survey. Completing this type of question helps us gather nuanced perspectives and experiences that can go beyond the quantitative approach that you've heard about so far and help identify additional concerns beyond the questions that were already part of the survey. Next slide. Now, we did find that 59% of tenants actually did not provide any suggestions. 41% did, for a total of 1,324 tenants providing suggestions, many of them having multiple suggestions. So there were a total of 2,884 identified suggestions in the comments that they wrote, for an average of about 2 suggestions per tenant. Next slide. Now, how do we go about understanding nearly 3,000 written comments? Well, we had a team review all of the comments and group them into 12 categories to help identify what the most common topics were for each of these comments. Now, some of the common topics included staff and management issues at 27% and property management issues at 22%. And again, by allowing the tenants to have their own say in their own words, it can help us uncover themes and patterns beyond what the rest of the survey already might help us explore. Next slide. And coming finally to our last approach, which is 2021 trending. So in 2021, a similar survey was conducted across 18 buildings, only 18 buildings, 15 from the Southeast and 3 from the Northeast. What we've done here is compare the results on some of the key questions. Again, in the detailed report, you'll see a further breakdown by all of the comparable questions. One thing we want to note here is we do need to interpret these trending results with caution, simply because there's differences in survey administration over time. The main value here is that it helps us understand the direction that things are going in, more so than any specific numerical differences that we might notice. Next slide. So what we're seeing here is that since transitioning from TSHC has been doing relatively consistently on items like overall satisfaction. We saw 82% in 2021 and a similar result of 80% in 2023. Things that were going well in 2021 continue to go well, with high ratings in areas like staff treating tenants with respect and buildings being well maintained. And similarly, areas that may have needed more attention in 2021 are also demonstrating relatively lower performance or lower scores in 2023-24. For example, programming at buildings and sense of community within buildings. So again, the value of this comparison is just to see the general direction over time. And the value of having done this survey in 2023-24 is it will give us information that we can use as a baseline to compare in future years. The next time that we do this survey, we'll have even more robust findings in the trending analysis. Next slide. So that does cover the overview that we have for today, and we'd be happy to answer any questions or comments at this time. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you for the very thorough review. Did anybody want to add anything before we open it up to questions? All right, it's a lot to take in.
Grant, you're on mute. Grant, you're on mute if you do. If you
Go ahead.
no.
Can others hear Grant?
I'll try it here now. Does
Now
that
we
work?
now
now?
we can hear you. We can hear you, Grant. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry. My apologies. Did you want to hear about some of the feedback from the Senior Tenant Advisory Committee, or would you rather ask questions
I
now?
think that would be actually kind of helpful, because it's kind of nice to hear what the tenants group said first, and then we'll open it up for others. So go ahead, Grant.
Just quickly, and so we didn't give the complete presentation that you just saw. We gave a portion of that at the Senior Tenant Advisory Committee meeting last week. And we asked some questions after we presented. Ayushman, who's on the call here, did the presentation, and I attended together. Some of the things that we heard, there was a bit of a focus on how to disseminate the results. So how does this sort of information get back to tenants? So we got some good feedback from STAC about some ideas there about keeping the information simple, how to leverage posters, seniors speak, the newsletter, and look at other ways to leverage opportunities where tenants are engaged in buildings, such as events or meetings. And we'll take that back as part of the planning for next steps to disseminate information. In terms of, where tenants, we asked if there was any results or findings that they were surprised about or whatnot. And, some of basically the feedback was that the stuff we were seeing or they were seeing wasn't necessarily coming as a surprise. So the fact that the scores were lower in some of the areas in the community development and programming, for example, was something that was sort of understood might be the result. And I think with regards to some of the other areas, the consistency between the two surveys between 21 and now was not necessarily a surprise either. One thing that we did hear that came up was, and we didn't focus on it here, but was on some tenants may have been hesitant to participate because of their concern about it being anonymous, and whether or not, how did that anonymity, how was it ensured? So we did hear a bit about that, and we did discuss, for example, at STAC about how we had worked to focus on the anonymity side, and this is a lesson learned that we can take back to make sure that as we go forward, tenants really are comfortable understanding that this is an anonymous survey, and we were not collecting any individual responses that we would actually see here at TSHC. So this is something that we can take back. There was information that was included when the survey was distributed and all that. However, it was good that STAC was feeling comfortable to express that, one member of STAC in particular. So those are some of the things we heard at STAC. If there's any questions, between forum ourselves, we can take any questions.
Thanks, Grant. And just as a first reaction, I found the summary very detailed, and actually the questions very detailed, and it was great to see some of the demographic breakdown. For me, it also confirmed that our committee is actually on the right track. The areas that we've been really concerned about in terms of people feeling like they're living in a community where they feel that they're participating and access to programs and services, stood out as opportunities. But it was actually very confirming that people feel pride in where they're living and some of the progress that we're making with staff. But that was my kind of early reactions. I would be curious, Maureen and Jim in particular, what your thoughts are. And I think actually the important piece will be some of the actions that come out of this. But I thought both the comprehensiveness of the survey and the results were positive. So good to see. Comments and questions, others? Brenda? And then I would love to hear from some of our tenants.
I'm happy to wait if Jim or Maureen wanted to comment ahead of me.
Go ahead, Brenda. Go ahead.
Okay. This is great stuff. Thank you, everyone who assisted, participated, led, directed, etc. Sat down and counted the numbers. A couple of quick questions and then some comments. Quick question is, did we ask how many were married versus single or attached? Because if you're on your own as you age, then that is a risk factor. So it seems like in all your demographic, you want to know people's sexual activity, but you don't want to know their their personal marital status. And so, and by the way, this has been a big debate about people asking about sexual orientation. And my experience has been people are really pissed by that question, don't see its relevance, and it leads to cynicism and lack of completion. I've had this in other conversations, other groups I'm on. And I know it's trendy, I know it's what, everyone tells you to do, but I would say for this, there's other ways to find out how best you can serve that community. And I would just suggest to you that my experience in other forums, and I'm dealing with health issues in some of my other forums, people tune out and refuse to finish surveys when it comes to that question. So that's the general comment. So to the question about whether we know what percentage are single, I'm assuming most are, but.
Or live alone.
Or live alone. Yes, exactly. That's a better way to put it.
That's a really good point. Is there a question that actually gives us a sense of, I imagine that a lot of our tenants actually live alone, but I might be wrong.
So we did not ask that specific question, Brenda, in the survey. However, I can say that we have other tools in terms of
other ways
from tenancy management that we can understand that the vast majority of our tenants are actually single. In terms of who's on the lease. And so yes, I believe it's close to 90%, 80 or 90% are single.
Yes. Okay. Quick one. I'm quite intrigued that the subtleties here, this is where the subtleties in the decision making will come in, right? Because lots of the gross figures we probably assumed. The percentage of people who responded by mail, once again proving how seniors do like mail. They didn't do it by web, they didn't do it even by email, they did it by mail. And I want us to keep that in mind in terms of distribution of any communication vehicle going forward. That going back to old school stuff will get you probably better information sharing, right? Getting something in your hand in your mailbox is going to be better than, oh, please go to the email and do this, okay? Secondly, the use of English. The use of English. And even though people have multiple languages, significant percentage of people are comfortable and happy and understand English. So that's not to diminish our need to have communication, translated, etc. But this was my experience in my agency too, that overwhelmingly people do understand. And so maybe the need is to be subtle in how we serve people with other larger number language groupings, the sense of community, the two areas that I noticed lower rates are the issue of the sense of community and the sense of services and service provision. Okay. Sense of community is something that develops over time. It's very subtle. It's certainly a goal. I mean, I keep on saying how people don't live in units, they live in their housing, they live in their community. So I think trying to infuse an understanding of community development in everything we do would be helpful. And that's a staff training exercise. So I want to red flag that perhaps to HR. Because the community development approach is a little different than just a mere service provision. I think the service provision, I always make distinction between social recreational activities, which can lead to bonding and community building. So I would suggest that we kind of encourage every building have a regular barbecue, Christmas dinner, whatever. But those simple things can often allow people a chance to meet their neighbors, to talk to them, to connect. And so I think it should be standard. It shouldn't just be up to people to suggest it. I think we should really encourage that every building have some sort of collective social activity. The ones where we're dependent on outside factors, like agencies, whether it's our referrals or agencies coming in, I think for me is the area I really want to work on. And I know it's going to come up in other reports, but I think it's really important that we got to get an integration between the social, recreational, human development stuff, and we've really got to come to grips with the direct service provision. We have to get agreements with LINs or whatever they call themselves now for on-site PSW care, because without housekeeping and personal care, people cannot age in place. So when we talk about wraparound services, and it's a wonderful phrase and everyone talks about it and very few actually accomplish it, I think it's important to know that we need to get those services on personal care. We need to get that discussion activated sooner rather than later. And I think that means some hard-hitting negotiation in each of the quadrants with healthcare and service providers. And I don't want us to take 3 months to develop an agreement with another Baycrest. And we keep on talking about Baycrest, which is great, and I know the work they do, it's wonderful. But every quadrant should have the same Baycrest, so to speak. And I know this is a human resource issue. There's only so many hours that staff have, but I think we can waste a lot of time in these large-scale negotiations, and really what we need to do is cross the street and say to a settlement agency, can you come in once a week? Can you come in twice a month? Going to another agency and saying, can we get a doctor to come by? My sister's building has a doctor who comes into the building. Okay, so as a result, their COVID vaccination rates were, and the public health was there too. They had very high rates because they actually attended. But the family doctor attending to the building means they're getting all those checkups done on a regular basis. And I know we can't, all buildings have this, but I think it should be a goal that we really need to start focusing on our partnership development as to what these agencies are going to bring to the table and accountability built in. Okay.
Thanks, Brenda. And I think
That's it.
Let's bring that back. And just in fairness to the group, I think there's a lot of
That's fine. Yeah.
underway. And
yes, I understand that.
Tie that into the actions, because I think that definitely our tenants are saying that we can do more of that.
Yeah, and those are our lower rates because everything else was very high.
Exactly. So wonderful observations. Thank you for that, Brenda. I'm going to pass it over to Jim. Your thoughts?
Jim. Jim.
Oh, it's muted, Jim.
Do you want to try the unmute?
Can you hear me better now?
Much better.
We can. Thank you.
Was on the computer speaker before a microphone rather than my own camera and microphone, and it made a big difference, I think, in whether you could hear me or not. I just wanted to say that what struck me about this was that the lowest rate of satisfaction seemed to be in the southeast area. I'm wondering why that is.
It's a good observation. Any early thoughts, Grant or Brad, Arlene?
So through the chair, Jim, in regards to the regional breakdowns for each of the questions that Tasmia went through and overall satisfaction, we do have an opportunity to take a deeper dive into the regional perspective. So the data that we get here allows us to do that. And then in some cases, depending on a number of surveys that came in for each building, we could theoretically go back and look at things at even more granular level if we felt it was something worth diving into. So I don't know if we have any initial specific response to why a rating is slightly higher or lower in a particular region without doing a bit of a deeper analysis.
Yeah.
Although it is something we have this is sort of part of our discussion on action plan and next steps as to, are there particular things we do want to do that deeper analysis on, for example, and that might be one. I don't know if anybody else wants to add to that, but I think that's where we would probably be at this stage.
To understand it more. It's a really good point though, Jim.
Thanks for the response. If you do that, I'd really like to find out what the results are.
It is interesting in that we do have a slightly different data set because of the portion of the Southeast region
right.
being previously
That's right. Yeah.
in an earlier survey. So yes.
Yeah, thanks. And I didn't remember that we actually only did a partial survey last time, so that was a good reminder. Lawrence, questions, comments?
Yeah. The response rate is 24% with a non-response bias of 76%. What was the completion rate? Do you have the completion rate?
Through the chair, I can take that. So the response rate
Yeah.
of 24% is the completion rate. I believe, Tasmia, correct me if I'm wrong. So we took all those surveys that were fully completed or at least were completed at least, like I think to the 50% degree in order to count their responses towards the survey. So any survey that we got back, whether it was partial and like almost completed or fully completed, so through the telephone or online, you have to have completed it fully in order for it to get submitted. So the 24% rate, you can pretty much mirror that to a 24% completion rate. We didn't get any like partial completes, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. One more question. How representative these responses were? In the sense, did you receive responses from all 83 locations?
Good question.
We did. So
Okay.
just to add to that really quickly, and Aishan was a big part of this as well with Forum and the site staff. And in the period when the survey was actually in process, we were getting weekly reports with regards to how the buildings were doing. So we could actually see if a particular building wasn't having much of a response rate or if one was having a higher response rate. And then we would actually target actions to go out and try to encourage the tenants to be aware of the survey and whatnot. So I can say that every building we actually have an understanding of the response rate per building. There was actually a variance there. I think some buildings were as high as in the mid 20 up to 30% range, some were lower in the 10% range. So that also plays into further analysis potentially. We're also going to be doing a lessons learned from all of this as a project to inform the next survey we do in 2025, 2026. So that'll be another opportunity for things in terms of, our goal is to get as many tenants comfortable participating in this survey so we can continue to, we're comfortable with the sample size here, but the more we can get, the more deeper the analysis could be. And so that's always a goal we'll have.
Yeah. Is in-person survey practical in future?
When you say through the chair, when you say an in-person survey, what can you just
in the sense, personally meeting these tenants and then getting their responses by the forum research?
No confidentiality.
Okay.
We can take that back. We were trying to be, and what I mean is we can think about how we could improve trying to support tenants in doing this survey. One of the things we wanted to also not inadvertently do was have tenants feel some sort of pressure in doing the survey either. And so the role of staff wasn't to complete the survey for tenants, for example, but it was to help provide them with a copy of the survey, potentially a copy in the language, but not to do it for them. An in-person survey could be considered, and maybe if there was a request for that, we could find a way to support that. So it's a good piece of feedback, Lawrence. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, really good questions.
Yeah.
Maureen, could I pass it to Maureen, Brenda? Maureen?
Maureen is on mute.
Yeah, you're on mute there. And I apologize for my camera being off. I'm having a little bit of bandwidth with when everybody's on camera. So go ahead, Maureen.
Okay, thanks, Linda. I think, Grant, that word that you just used there, request, because some people may request assistance from staff because they simply can't do it by themselves. So given that option, I think would be something that's helpful. And as far as the Southeast region, I live in the Southeast region. I have made a point of never relating what's going on in my building, but rather look at everything in the all 83 buildings. So I'm not even going to touch that one because it's one of those things where your mother says, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. That's my comment on the Southeast region. But what I do want to go back to, looking at when the demographics section, where the language and how did that, it mentioned it has little impact or no impact on understanding of lease and building matters. But there was no question there regarding how language impacts socials, programs, and health. So perhaps that question should have been asked in there as well. And the one that kind of stands out the most to me, we've tossed around words from day one. Seniors focus, seniors lens, seniors perspective. And none of us have actually sat down and come up with any kind of description of what that is. So that, when it comes to the number of disabilities and the understanding of accessibility from a senior's perspective, is a really an area of opportunity for us here. Because I think we all jump to an automatic assumption of what accessibility is, and it's actually quite limited. And in the Accessibility Act, or whatever the Ontario government calls it, there are mention of special accommodations for seniors or special understanding of seniors' needs, but even there, it's not completely defined.
That's right.
And
or enforced.
just as seniors have a broad range of health concerns, they also have a broad range of low to high disabilities, whether that's mental capacity, whether that's physical capacity. It doesn't mean they're all driving around in scooters. So I think that whole piece around what is the senior's lens and what does accessibility mean to them personally, I think that's something that would be a good chance. Your action plan will be a good chance to look at that. So that's my thoughts on that.
Thanks, Maureen. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that this really does paint a picture. I think that the demographics really does paint a picture of the typical, and not that there's typical, but the faces of the people that live in our buildings. And I agree with you that these are people that are living with disability or mobility issues or pain. I think there's some great opportunities there. Tom?
Yeah, I know we're approaching kind of time on this one, but I couldn't pass this up with for my first kind of reaction, a surprise reaction for me was around safety and security, around over 80% feeling safe in their unit or building. And when comparing that to going every single building that I visited, that was raised as an issue. And so to me, really,
I saw that. Yeah.
but this is, to me, this is really, then the next step for me is that we need to understand more. What is the activity, the risk, and the analytics and data supporting the comments that we're hearing and the results that we're seeing of this survey? So that to me was a kind of a major aha moment. But certainly, the leadership team know that I'm, pushing forward, and the CSU, the Community Safety Unit Review, is underway, and this will continue to be a focus. But it was just so interesting for me to kind of to see that result versus we QIP and everything that we did on safety and security. So interesting.
Yeah. I saw that too, Tom.
That's a really good point, Tom. Grant, can you talk a little bit about the next steps? Because I imagine like we're first in the queue with STAC, and what's the next step in terms of how the results are going. We're going to be bringing this to the board, but we're also going to be bringing it out to tenants and the action planning. If you could speak to that.
Sure. So through the chair. So we will be bringing this report and a presentation for the July 18th board. So the full board will have an opportunity and formal support us in that, and IUSHMIT as well. So we look forward to that. In terms of communicating the results, we'll start to communicate. Some of this has already been communicated out internally at a certain level within TSHC, but we'll be talking about it at the town hall that was mentioned earlier on next week. So there'll be a little bit of an opportunity for staff to start hearing in more detail about these results. And then there's a plan to communicate out more broadly to tenants, which is still being developed a little bit based on some of the input, for example, that we got at STAC last week. But we already plan to, for sure, put some stuff in the senior speak and look at how to get the information out to tenants, and then include it in some of those engagement opportunities with tenants as well. And then depending on the action plan, so internally we're going to be undertaking a more formal action plan process. So for example, We'll be looking at the data in more detail, looking at all the current plans and activities we have, for example, and how these results may align and inform those, and if we need to make some adjustments. So think about the roadmap of strategic directions, for example, and how this may be applied in that lens. We'll do that kind of analysis as well. Also look at where we might do a deeper analysis associated with the results on some of the topics, for example, we've heard about today. Some of the results will also be used to inform how we do things like communication, to your point earlier, Brenda, for example, because there were other questions that were not in the summary presentation here today, but are in the more detailed material around preferred methods for communication, for example. And then looking at some of these things like disability. This is information, for example, that we collected more detail around this time than that earlier survey. And it gives us a new opportunity. So, really our hope is that by the time we get to board in July, that we'll have a little bit more specifics on the action plan. However, it may still not be completed because we want to make sure we do this thoroughly. But that's sort of the next steps. I just want to, again, reiterate a big thanks to Ayushman, Wynn, and Tasmia from Forum, and all the other folks that help support this, and all the tenants that participated in this and provided their feedback and input as well.
That's great. Thank you. And thank you for the robust feedback. Thank you to our guests that came and presented. Any other final comments that you wanted to make? Any recommendations to us at this phase in the
Just one final point about access, disability and accessibility. I think there's an under measurement of that. We should always assume all seniors will have mobility problems at some point, or pain issues, etc. So I think for me, I can tell you the capital cost needs to be factored in and increased, because you're going to increasingly need roll-in showers instead of just a regular bathtub and shower. Okay.
Yeah, it's a good point in terms of using the data to inform our other decision making. It's a good point, Brenda. Thank you very much. So if there aren't any other comments, I just want to echo the thanks, and I think it's great that we can actually segue into the next item that actually starts to speak about how we're building community. And Tasmia and Winsome, you're welcome to stay, but if you're leaving, that's okay too. We understand. So I'm going to pass it over to Arlene for the update on the Community Activities Fund.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you to the presenters previous. Really great information that was shared, and I'm pleased to be able to provide an update on how we're trying to address one of the largest areas for improvement from the tenant experience survey. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Community Activities Fund and Community Connect Plus, a year-to-date report. If we could move to the next slide, please. The first slide I'm going to touch down on will give you a sense of the meetings that we've had over the period of January 15th to March 22nd, where staff went out and met with tenants across the corporation. We had about, sorry, hold on one second. My mouth isn't working right now. You're wondering, just give me a second. We had 68 meetings over that time. The two buildings that we didn't have a chance to meet with in that period really had to do with they're under construction, so that's a bit of why we didn't complete all of the meetings that we had in place. But through those meetings, we articulated from the tenants that they're looking for 283 tenant-led activities where they would do activities on their own. Last year we had 99 activities, so that's a remarkable increase. Year to date, as of this report on May 15th, you'll see that we had approved 45 CAF applications that had already come in. Since filing this report, we've actually increased that number to 190 CAF applications that have been submitted to have a variety of events for 2024, sorry. And speaking, Brenda, to your comment earlier about having barbecues and holiday celebrations and things of that nature. Absolutely. That's been the area of focus for us to work on delivering those this year based on what the population has decided that they want to have. So that's an area of focus for us in the tenant-led activity space. If we could move to the next slide, please. In the community programming space, we had quite a number of requests come in there as well, 278 program requests. As we noted earlier, there is a real desire from the population to have access to more community programs that meet their needs. So we're working on that and working on increasing our partnership. As I mentioned in our last meeting, we are working with Toronto Community Housing to sort out the agreements piece of it. But we have seen there are areas that we're seeing new information. For example, Tom and I had an opportunity to meet with an organization called House Calls, and they support about 1,000 tenants across the city by providing PSW, in-home OTPT, and nurse practitioner or family doc services to tenants in their in-suite services. They service 1,000 people across the city, and over 500 of the people they service are Toronto seniors tenants, which I think is quite a large number. It's 50% of the population that they can serve, and they're looking to expand their services, but they're actually located in a very specific part of the city with only 10 postal codes that they serve. So as we learn more about some of these programs that are being directly accessed by tenants, not part of a relationship that we're involved with, these are things that we're trying to figure out, how do we track and report that back to the committee and boards moving forward. But I just wanted to note that this is some of the work that we're looking to get our hands on to be able to better report on the nature of the relationships, how many tenants are receiving those services, and the nature of the services that we can report on. So that's as it relates to community programs. And then there was 373 equipment requests from tenants to help increase activities within the building, whether that's for exercise equipment or for chairs for outdoors or things of that nature. Those are things that we are also looking to try and fulfill. In meeting with our implementation table that is made up of tenants, they're advising us on how we implement Community Connect Plus and the CAF moving forward. They asked us to focus primarily on the requests coming for tenant-led programs in this year. So that's where our primary focus is to try and build that sense of community. That's where one of our big indicators for improvement. We're going to be focusing on that, and we will try to fulfill some of these equipment requests as quickly as we can. I would like to note in the area of requests, one of the things we have had is requests for Wi-Fi support. And the city is doing a Wi-Fi expansion, and they're doing consultations right now on the area of expanding Wi-Fi coverage in all of their buildings. We are actually working on a pilot project with them at 5 sites across the city to implement a Wi-Fi program in our buildings to be able to try and meet the need. We're not entirely sure whether they will get to all 83 of our buildings, but they're just starting as of today, actually, to work on delivering a Wi-Fi program across 5 of our sites and then piloting that. And it's in conjunction with the work that we've done with Toronto Public Library. So they get the digital literacy training. In some cases, they get the technology, and now they have the means to access the technology because the Wi-Fi will be there. So I just wanted to just mention that as part of the requests that we've been receiving. We are actually in the midst of fulfilling some of those. So if we can move to the next slide, please. So in our CAF meeting, it's a sense of how many meetings we had and the number of tenant volunteers we had stepping forward. Last year we had to the tune of just over 70 volunteers participating through the previous tenant leader program. Moving to the Community Connect Plus approach, we're seeing that people really do. There's a real desire to volunteer. I was in a meeting with a large volunteer organization today, the YMCA, and they told me that they've seen a really marked uptake in the number of people that are coming forward to be volunteers in their organization as well. So we're seeing here that we have about 467 people stepping up wanting to be volunteers. So to that end, that means we have to do some work around volunteer development and volunteer management as part of our work plan moving forward. So I just wanted to touch down on that, and noting that we had 42 interpreters available to support staff during these meetings. If we can move to the next slide, please. So what we've learned from our meeting results, the building meetings that we've held to support the Community Activities Fund, is that tenants are eager and willing and really wanting to engage to start, to continue to build community. COVID, of course, took the wind right out of many people's sails in terms of wanting to congregate and wanting to even getting back together for folks has been challenging. So we're seeing that that's really what people they're wanting to do. That they want to have tenant-led activities, and in fact, in many of the programs that were requested by tenants as part of the feedback around what kind of programs they wanted, I'd say 70% of the feedback 70% of the programs they're wanting us to implement are really around capacity building and their own skills development, less in the area of health and care, but more around being able to be more literate around their own self-care and exercise and eating well and being able to really sustain their individuality and then create this sense of community. They like the idea of establishing and participating in tenant circles, but this is work that we have to evolve. It is work that the implementation table will also be working to help us define what its tenant circle might be versus some other expressions that are being used, like round tables and councils and those sorts of things, because the tenants, what we envisaged was that there would be various circles in a building. There's like the building circle overall, but there might be smaller circles that focus on specific areas of interest, like a garden circle or a knitting circle or a reading circle and things of that nature. So we have to figure those pieces out. We're in the midst of trying to determine some of that work moving forward with the support of our implementation table. Tenants really appreciated being asked, and they really appreciated the inclusivity of the building meetings. And they do have lots of skills to contribute, and they want to be able to contribute those. So that's a bit of an overview on the CAF building meeting results. If we can move to the next slide, please. Just turning our minds to Community Connect Plus, which is the underpinning of our tenant engagement approach. You'll see on the screen what looks like two logos, and in fact it is one logo treated differently. When we had our last regional meetings with tenants in April of this year, we had 4 meetings over the course of April 22nd to April 26th. We asked the tenants that were in attendance if they would pick the image that they felt best represented how they felt about Community Connect, and this was one of the 3 treatments that was put in front of tenants and staff as well, and this is the one everyone chose, and I think it plays very well to the feeling that people are at the center. And it's almost like a keyhole. It's the key to change. It's the key to people, community, and so this is the logo that we're going to be using.
I didn't get that.
You didn't get
No. No, I see it. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. But it was overwhelmingly the first choice of both tenants and staff in developing a brand for Community Connect Plus that we're going to be using moving forward. So I just wanted to touch down for folks on the branding, and also that we had about over 140 volunteers show up for our meetings this time, which included all of the new volunteers that were interested in being part of the regional tables. Last year, we would probably have only had about 80 volunteers show up for these meetings. So just to give you a comparator. If we can move to the next slide, please. As part of our most recent meetings to try and make more community connections, we did a few things. We introduced the sharing of best practices because we know that our tenants, the tenants that are part of Toronto Seniors Housing, they have really good skills, ability, knowledge, and background. And so we asked them to showcase and share some of their talents and skills, and they shared stories of events and activities that they've done in their buildings with each other. And that was really quite well received by the folks that were in the room. People felt appreciated. They felt they had a voice in sharing their knowledge and skills. And so we will continue to build that in to all of our meetings moving forward. We also had a photo booth and a video booth. Matt, our roving amazing digital resource, was available to take headshots of tenants and general shots that are highlighted here, and also to do the videos that will be part of the communications that we have moving forward into June. to support Seniors Month and to support what it means to be a senior at Toronto Seniors Housing. So we leverage the opportunity of having these regional meetings with building out some digital assets with the support of tenants. We also were able to gather at these meetings the consent to share information amongst the tenant volunteers so that they can connect with each other to increase their sharing of knowledge and skills. This is something that they've asked for quite some time, and we've finally been able to bridge the gap by getting the consent. The distribution of all that information will come in a few weeks, but I just wanted to touch down that we were able to actually fulfill that which had been an open item with tenants for quite some time. If we could move to the next slide, please. You've heard me speak a couple of times already about the implementation table with its 7 tenant volunteers. Maureen is among them. This table meets every 6 weeks to discuss the Community Connect Plus plan and the work that is envisaged in that plan moving forward. And as I said earlier, the focus is on delivering tenant-led programs for 2024. They've told us that that's actually the primary space that we should focus on because of the resourcing challenges that we're facing. This is where they feel that we will get the most value will be felt by tenants. So that is the area that we're going to focus on in delivering the 283 tenant-led events between June and December. It's a very small job, but we're on it. And they've also asked us to create the metrics to measure the results for our Community Connect Plus for 2024. And we're also going to be collecting those data points and be able to come back and report on that later in the year. And they told us that given the volume of the work, we just need to continue to deliver a plan to deliver all of the parts considered in Community Connect Plus over the coming years and not try to do it all at once, which we very much appreciate. So I just wanted to just touch down that that's what the implementation table is advising us on. They're also advising us on some of the documents, some of the guidelines around roles and responsibilities for tenant volunteers, the code of conduct for tenant volunteers, as well as how if a tenant volunteer is not adhering to the code, how do we go about removing that volunteer? So they're advising us very much in looking at the old guidelines and helping us to revise the wording so that it is more appropriate to the audience and it meets the needs of the audience in a more appropriate way. If we could move to the next slide, please. The tenant circles I spoke to briefly, that we are learning that we have a lot of work to do to develop these tenant circles. We have approximately tenant circles formed in the portfolio. And when I presented to the board back in December, our goal was to have 4 by the end of the year. So while we have these circles in place, I don't know that they're all running exactly the same way. And that actually isn't necessarily a requirement. They have to work in a way that's effective for each environment, but we'd like to get some consistency in how we define a tenant circle and how we use some other words, as I said before, like councils and tables and things like that. So we're going to be looking to our partners at the implementation table to help us to get some clearer definitions on these. And I also touched down on the fact that we're now able to exchange information across buildings, across regions with the consent form. That was part of the conversation that we had when we had our last regional meeting. And then finally, we've also established the partnership table. We had a meeting in February, and the one that we were supposed to have in April had to be postponed. So we're meeting actually on Monday to talk about how the partnership table can be leveraged to better support the needs of all buildings across the city so that we can more consistently provide the service that Brenda was talking to before, so that we can balance out where there are gaps. How do we balance them out, and who is able to help us fill those gaps? And that's the purpose of the partnership table, where we have a number of hospitals working with us, but we also are working very practically with the smaller agencies to get those partnership agreements in place to continue to deliver services and supports. And my final slide has to do with meeting our commitments. And I know that the board and the committee is always very concerned about, the staffing levels to support this work. And so we are recruiting 2 new clerks. One will start in June and one will likely start in July. So that's wonderful news for us because we only had 1 clerk for last year. We've also, with the support of everyone at the leadership team level, we've been able to recruit 2 temporary community service coordinators to help with the delivery of community activity funds. So this is the building community work over June to December. We hope to have those folks starting in June. And then we're building a business case for more permanent community service coordinators in the 2025 budget, because we cannot continue to be, delivering over 300 events and 300 programs and 300 pieces of equipment with 4 staff trying to serve 15,000 tenants. That's not a reasonable conclusion. So we're going to be making a case for increasing that into 2025. And we're also looking to get a contracts management staff in place to be able to support getting our partnership agreements in place, getting them to a point where we are actually able to come back to the board and the committees and report on the results of impact and efficacy of the work that we're doing in the partnership space. We're still not in a good place to be able to do that. We're putting in contracts management folks to be able to help us articulate that better, follow that up better, and make sure that we can get that reporting piece done in a more and then in a more timely way. Then finally, just we did issue RFPs for both our summer barbecue events and our holiday celebrations. So that's anything that happens in the fall or the winter. We've had those RFPs have closed, and we are able to actually really exercise the economy of scale through that purchasing power of trying to buy for all of the buildings that are participating. So we're going to see good return on the investment of doing that process of issuing RFPs and getting folks to respond, because we are getting excellent pricing on all of these events for tenants. And our trending shows that we're on track to probably spend most of our budget for 2024. You will notice in the detailed report that's in the appendix that we haven't actually spent anything in Q1, obviously because we were having the meetings, and our spending in Q2 will be limited, but you'll see a big rise in Q3 and Q4 in our spending. So I just wanted to touch down on that for you as well. So that's my report.
Thank you very much. It's very timely given the focus of the survey. We don't have a lot of time, but open the floor for questions, comments. Good to see that there's progress being made in this area. And there's lots to chew on here though, because there's many components of this report. So we may have to do some follow-up. Brenda?
Sorry. Just to confirm your comments about volunteer training and management, I think that's going to be key. It's wonderful what you guys are doing. Just to put it in context, I just recently read a couple reports on the absolute collapse of the volunteer workforce. Meals on Wheels programs are not being delivered because they can't get volunteer drivers. So there's been something like a 20 to 40% drop in volunteers. So we're managing to ride above that curve and getting people volunteering. So it's good to try and make sure we nurture them and support them, right? And my last question was about the partnership table. Partnership table, meaning what? Partners outside of Toronto Seniors Housing?
Yes.
Yes. So that would be community organizations and agencies. Okay. And that, who's on that partnership table? Is it staff and tenants? Who is it? That is.
Yes, is the answer through the chair.
Okay.
So Brenda, it is the likes of Baycrest and UHN, as well as EMS, along with and the Baycrest UHN folks wear Ontario Health Team hats as well, so they serve a double purpose. And also their staff. So Brad and I, Renee are there. And then we also have tenant volunteers who are at the table as well, who bring their perspective to the conversation.
So it's just Baycrest so far?
No, it's not just Baycrest.
Okay.
We've got Michael Guerin, we've got Unity Health, we've got UHN, we've got the EMS services, we've got Baycrest. So yes, there are others at the table.
Are you any closer to getting commitments from them to cooperate and deliver or do something for us? I mean, you can spend a lot of hours in your life going to meetings called partnership meetings, right? So I'm just trying to think, is there an actual agenda that they will actually commit by a certain date?
So through the chair, those relationships are really very active. We're constantly looking to expand those relationships, and they are helping us to figure out how we can expand into other buildings where they don't provide services right now, and how do we access Ontario Health Team resources in order to bring more services into home. We have it's a 5-bucket work plan, and we are just getting to the point where we can talk about, we've only had 2 meetings, so we're just getting to the point where we can talk about, here are the areas we want to address: transition in care, education for tenants, data collection and reporting, just 3 of the areas that we want to work on, and then growing programs within the community as well. So we're looking to them to help guide some of those conversations, because the OHTs and those hospitals have access to so many more resources in the community than we do. But we also have another group of partners, the agencies that we work with, like the Wood Greens and the churches, and the smaller agencies or agencies like Sprint that we also do work with. We're continuing. That work continues.
Okay.
They continue to provide services. We're looking to, how do we grow more services across the city using some of the folks sitting at this table. And so EMS, for example, they helped us by providing a specific piece of information that STAC had requested. They wanted a form that that people could post on the back of their doors in case of emergency, so that there was information that could speak for them. I sent an email, and within 5 minutes, our EMS partner got back to me and said, here's the form, here's the link to our website. It's in 18 language. Please feel free to share it. And so they're very responsive, and they're always looking for ways to help us and support us and grow our relationships.
So there's 2 levels. There's the higher level healthcare partners, which will take hours and months to negotiate with. And then there's the community level. And it's really at that community level I'm concerned about, because they're the people who are going to deliver the aging at home services. So we can talk about fancy partners. It's wonderful. We have to do that. But keep in mind, when the rubber hits the road, it's going to be those community agencies that do all the aging at home. It is not the hospitals. They'll do services.
It might be good, Brenda, to look at what the Ontario Health Teams are doing though right now. In fairness, no organization is working independently right now. So if you look at, and we might want to provide some links to Brenda and others around, like the Ontario Health Teams, because nobody's operating in isolation. There's no hospital that's going out and doing this work in isolation. You spoke about house calls, Arlene. Arlene, that is an integrated system that has hospital partners, and it has community support partners, and it has other partners that are actually going into places where people actually need integrated support. So what I'm hearing is we actually do have services that are into many of our buildings, and that we're trying to actually build a richer framework. But I think the message is we're not just planning, and it's not just around hospitals.
No, I understand that. Thank you. Yes, but we've been talking about this, and I think it's a resource issue in terms of staff time and bodies. I mean, and I appreciate that. And that might speak to one of the priority areas for staffing. You need someone on this, because you got to do follow-up, and you got to do building relationships with those people. As much as we build our relationships with our organization. Right?
Thanks. And I'm going to pass it to Tom, and then Maureen, and then I'm going to try to adjourn us. Tom, you're muted.
The infamous, you're on mute. Yes. You can hear me now. So just 2 points. Stay tuned on this kind of the partnership work, community agency involvement and support and agreements. There is, as we have evolved as an organization, this is such a huge potential for supports in a building. There's a big but, and Brenda, you nailed it. It's the resourcing, right? So when this integrated service model was put into place, there was not resources for this building out. So stay tuned on that work and what we bring forward. And just secondly, my observation, kind of coming back to Toronto seniors and with this community connect work in place, I just had a real sense of confidence when I saw what had been kind of, I'll use the term, built out, where we now have a much more comprehensive representation at the building with our tenants. We now have regional meetings in place where our tenants come and have a voice kind of in a different way, but an influential way.
Yes.
We have our stack now, which represents kind of across the organization, and we have tenants on our board. So I think I just want to really kind of to Arlene and the team and their credit, just how this Community Connect has built out to represent the organization. Thank you.
That's a good reminder, and thank you, Tom. Maureen?
You need more help. Yeah.
There we go. Arlene, couple of questions around the partnership table. Back to our earlier conversation around the different regional services, resources, and how that's not well balanced at this point. So I'm wondering, is this partnership table well balanced so that it represents all 4 regions? The other question I have about that is, are they assisting in actually making the connections with the smaller community agencies, or are they telling you who to go to? So are they involved in helping with that? And the other thing too, just back to the volunteer development, I think that's an important piece that will go hand in hand with the discussion at the implementation table around the different roles of the different volunteers, because I think different levels of volunteer training are going to be required. So those 2 things will have to go hand in hand. So those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Maureen. Always sage comments. Arlene?
Thank you, through the chair. So balanced representation, Maureen, yes, we have from across the city, we have different folks sitting at that table, both from a tenant perspective and from a partnership perspective. In terms of whether the partners are just telling us and not helping us, we've only had 2 meetings with this partnership table. So we're very nascent in this relationship. We're trying to build that bridge. But I can tell you, for example, I get a lot of emails saying, can I introduce you to so-and-so, and can we all have a conversation about how we can work together to help the work that Toronto Seniors is doing? Because to Linda's earlier point, nobody is working in splendid isolation. It's just not the way things are working anymore.
Yep, that's right.
The Ontario health system is going through a massive restructuring once again. And their focus is going to be delivering services in community and at home. Like that, they're really refocusing from hallway medicine to to trying to keep people in their homes as well. So we will see lots of change in that space. We have to be careful because we walk some fine lines, and we can talk about that at a later time. And then in the area of volunteer development that you touched down on, Maureen, yes, we will actually be coming to the implementation table to talk about what is envisaged for this volunteer development, because I see it as something that's an evolution with the partners that we're going to be working with as to how we develop that program and when we execute it, and how it grows and how it meets the needs of the varying roles that the folks at Toronto Seniors will have in the area of being volunteers. Thank you for those comments.
Thanks, Arlene. Thank you for that report. I think we're going to have lots more to talk about in terms of these partnerships and Community Connect, but that was a really thorough presentation. Exciting that so many that people are wanting to get involved. I can't help but keep saying that this is such a great action item from the survey, and that we're putting resources in the right places, but we need more resources is what we're hearing, and understanding that we're living and working in complex times in terms of our healthcare system and the needs around us. So if there aren't any other questions, I'm going to suggest that we move for thank Arlene, and I would like to thank everyone who has actually helped us to put this meeting together. It was actually, I think it was a good meeting in terms of substantive items that were important to this group. I look forward to the board actually also hearing, and I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Can I have a motion for Maureen and a seconder? Thank you, Jim. All in favor? And just before we go, I just want to apologize for my camera. I'm not really trying to go in and out. I was losing people's sound every once in a while, and I found that when I went off camera that I could hear people better. My apologies. I'll work on that for the next meeting. But we'll say that the meeting is adjourned, and thank you all, and have a lovely evening, and enjoy the beginning of June. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Thanks, Linda.
everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you.